Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I apologize. We had a technical issue we needed to work out with Zoom, but we're ready to start our presentation now. My name is Robert DeFore. I'm the District Superintendent of Sullivan BOCES, and it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today's countywide conference day, Dr. Anael Alston. Born and raised in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, Dr. Alston, or Dr. A, is currently the Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Access, Equity, and Community Engagement at the New York State Department of Education. In this capacity, he informs educational policy across the state and administers over $200 million to help support students across New York from pre-K through college. Prior to that, he was the Superintendent of Schools for the Hamilton Central School District. As a superintendent, Dr. Alston distinguished himself as one of the few superintendents across the state to have a 100% graduation rate while moving an agenda that included creating a program that allows international students to pay tuition to attend public school and involve in the entire community in creating a board-adopted 5-year strategic plan to improve access, opportunity, and fiscal responsibility to a small rural school district. As a principal, Dr. Alston has been recognized by the county, state, and at the national level for his ability to lead teams to increase capacity and raise student achievement. Dr. Alston has written political commentary for Newsday, as well as for local, regional, and national publications. He has presented at national and statewide conferences on school change and curriculum reform. He's testified for Governor Cuomo's Education Reform Commission, and he's made guest appearances on radio shows as an education expert. He has been consulted on various educational initiatives and has given speeches from Brooklyn, New York to Cape Town, South Africa. He is also co-author of the book, You're Hired, The Inside Secrets to Landing Your School Leadership Job. His latest work, Growing Up Single, An Unorthodox Road Traveled, is a featured chapter published in Telling Our Stories. Culturally Different Adults Reflect on Growing Up in Single-Parent Families by Dr. Donna Y. Ford, and was published in the summer of 2017. Dr. A, or Dr. Alston, is a colleague and a friend of mine for many years. I hope you enjoy his presentation, and I ask that you please give him your attention. Dr. Alston, welcome. You're muted, Anael. Dr. Ray, you're muted.
I'm good now. I'm good now.
Okay.
Thank you. I just needed permission. Thank you for the generous introduction, Dr. DeFore. It is great to be with everyone in Sullivan County virtually, and I'm just excited for this presentation. I'm honored to be with new friends, old friends, and the time to talk about what is so important at this time, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to thank the nearly 300 people who are here, who are showing your commitment to the young people across Sullivan County, but in a larger context, New York State. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I think it's important to share this about me before we go deeper into it. Well before any titles and doctor and different degrees, I think it's important to know that I not only am a proud son of Brooklyn, but I am a proud son of equity and the push for equity. And that's important to me because here's what you need to know. When I was growing up in Brooklyn in the 80s, it was very difficult where I lived, Bedford-Stuyvesant. Someone had the fortitude and foresight to say, why don't the poor Black and brown kids in Bedford-Stuyvesant have the opportunities to go to a gifted and talented school. Poor people aren't dumb. Brown people aren't dumb. They have capacities. And I had the opportunity, because it was there, to go to a gifted and talented school in Bedford-Stuyvesant for 7th and 8th grade. And that impacted me. But that was an equity issue, because in other neighborhoods in New York City, they had it. And so in the 7th and 8th grade, I was tackling quadratic equations. We went to Broadway. We went to Florida for our senior trip. And those were opportunities that everyone else didn't have, but other communities had. So I just wanted to share that as a context. It's not just academic and professional for me. It's personal as well. I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to get right into it. Okay. Could I get a thumbs up if you could see the screen, if you can see my screen? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it, Dr. DeFore. Okay. So diversity, equity, inclusion, promise and possibility for all students. And all is significant for us. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But let's talk about what we're going to do during this time we have together, right? Today, we're going to give the why behind diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to define it. And I'm going to ask for us to use the chat room for it to be interactive. So I'm not talking to a computer all day. I know I'm talking to closely at least 300 people, but I'd like there to be some engagement. And I think we'll get more out of it. We're going to kind of talk about what advantage and disadvantage is on autopilot, right? And so we'll engage in that. We'll engage with each other. And then toward the end, we'll get into an example of equity in action. So let's begin. This is the golden circle from what Simon Sinek calls in his book, Start With Why. Most people, average person can clearly articulate what it is they're doing. And that's fine, right? A smaller group of people can articulate how they do things. But Sinek says, and I've come to find and understand that I think the game is maximized for us when we can start with why and understand why. So why diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I like to try and make things practical and put it where it makes meaning and sense to everyone. So we're going to move from that, and we're going to move right into our New York State Board of Regents beliefs. See, this is important because beliefs tend to drive behavior. What you believe helps drive what it is you do on a day-to-day basis. New York State Board of Regents believes that every student, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, ability status, spoken language, socioeconomic status, remember that poor kid in Brooklyn, faith, place of residence, has the right to a rich, supportive, and engaging educational experience. That is a belief. Beliefs drive behavior. I think you get that already. I know you do because you're educators. And something about your belief system said I should go and educate and build my community or the community to which you serve. So thank you for that. New York State is one of the most diverse states in the nation, and the Board of Regents has long held a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so another way of looking at things is national security. The question that I often ask myself when I have these kinds of conversations is, can America remain competitive in a global village that is competitive without educating its entire population? That's a key question. So why don't you put in the chat what your thoughts are? Can we remain a powerhouse in a globally competitive village without educating all? That's significant. But let's move it locally, right? So this weekend, if you're into fight, I was a former Golden Gloves champion, so I still follow boxing. There's a big boxing match, Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, okay? And I'm curious if you either know someone who's into boxing or MMA, just put your thumb up, like maybe it's just your spouse, maybe it's a child. If you know someone, put your thumb right? If you know someone who's into that, doesn't have to be you, okay? Because you're just going to need to know a little bit about what I'm about to say. If all doesn't mean all, as a nation, as a county, as a state, to educate them and help them be productive, I see it as the equivalent of going into the fight ring, into the boxing ring with one arm. You're partially prepared to compete. And that is a recipe for disaster. So why diversity, equity, inclusion? Because to not do it puts us as a county, as a state, as a nation at a huge disadvantage in a globally competitive world. And to make that even clearer terms, one cannot be productive and provide for him or herself, which makes them a drain on the community rather than pouring in and adding value to the community. Thumbs up if that makes sense as a concept, just as a concept. Thank you. Let's move on. One of the things that I said we're going to do is we're going to look at, and we'll get to define it in a minute, but I want us to take a look at advantage and disadvantage on autopilot, right? And what do I mean by that? There are going to be people who have built-in advantages based on how they are raised. And this is brain science, and we're going to show that. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you to do this. Just take a minute and let's remove any of the isms, sexism, racism, homophobism, oppression, none of that, gender inequality pay, that unfair treatment. Let's take all of that and let's make believe we live in a world where no unfairness exists. Everyone is free to do whatever they want to do up to their talent and ability. Okay. Now, let's watch this video and let's see how it plays out. Only 2 minutes. This is from the work of Dr. Ronald Ferguson, with permission to share, to use in my presentation, but architectures in the brain. Watch this.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, now, some of you are alone, some of you with partners, but I want to take 30 seconds or less, and just for you to summarize or write down, what did you get from that? Right? Just what did you get from that? What resonated with you, right? So what resonated with me, and I'll just share mine, experiences and environment dictate development. Okay, take 30 seconds and either write down or just share with someone what resonated with you from that, because I think that's significant. It's going to take a few seconds. So we're going to tune back in and you know, maybe next time we'll be together and we can do it. But the thing that resonates with me is there is, also some people put in the chat, although you're direct messaging me, don't direct message me, maybe everyone should be able to see it. The groundwork before students get to us. The early years are the most important. People are putting that stuff in. The Zoom isn't set up like that. Okay, I get it. Thank you. Appreciate it. And so here's the thing. Without any factors at play, there are people who have experiences and environments that are conducive for them to be set up for success before they show up to school. And then the question is, what do we do about it to give them the best shot? Next slide. Okay, so now we're looking at, and I think this is significant because it ties in. Look at what the neural network of a newborn, a 1-month-old, 9 months, you get that. But I want you to notice the difference between a 2-year-old and an adult. This is from Harvard University. We've known this since the 70s, folks. And what I'm getting out of this is that there is not much graphic difference between the neural networks of a 2-year-old and an adult, right? And so this is happening, much of the brain development well before youngsters come to us. Now, again, DEI, we're getting there, but I want us to get a big picture here. So now I'm going to kind of show this video as a way to show how we can, as adults, and certainly those who work 0 to 3 with students and babies, quite frankly, can build these circuits that was outlined earlier.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage and serve in return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
Okay, so with a partner, we're going to take, 30 seconds, or with yourself, just write it down. What resonated with you? What sat with you? What moved you? What do you want to take away from that very short video clip? And I'll share mine after after another 10, 20 seconds. I thought the concept for educating all is a laudable one. Nature versus nurture. Thank you. What resonated with you? You can write it down on a sheet of paper. Talk to someone if you're in the same room. That's significant. Okay, so now I'm going to share, what resonated with me, because each time I watch this video, I get something new and different. Starts very early. Wrote that down. I wrote down infrastructure for brain development. I thought that was significant for me. I wrote literacy and language skills. I thought that was significant. So now I see someone wrote seeing mothers nurtured, but not a lot of fathers. Okay, that resonated with someone. Okay. So now I'm going to ask the question, can you see, even without barriers, because remember the mindset we were in, right? There is no racism, sexism, homophobia, barriers. Everyone can live up to their own capacity and ability, no structural problems. Okay, very good. So now can we see how there is auto advantage and disadvantage happening regardless? Just let that kind of marinate for a minute. Some experiences are more conducive to building the infrastructure than others. Okay, so I'm going to move on. And Dr. DeFore, I hope you have me back in person. That excites me. Let me move. Okay, so there's two compelling facts. And then we're going to get into definition. Racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic skill gaps in the US are very clear in national data by age 2. Science is very clear about the types of lived experience in the first 3 years that make a positive difference. We have a moral imperative to act. So here's what we know. People tend to want to work in their own self-interest. I'm saying as a country, as a state, as a county, we should work in our own best interest, and all mean all. And so before we go any further, why don't we talk about a clear definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity includes, but is not limited to, race, color, ethnicity, nationality, religion, socioeconomic status, veteran status, education, marital status, language, age, gender, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, mental or physical ability, genetic information, and learning styles. Okay? And learning styles. We're educators. So some of these are going to resonate a little bit more than others. Learning styles jumps out at me as an educator, right? Of course, that doesn't minimize it. So here, I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read it faster. And then I'm going to ask you to just put down 4 words that kind of you would summarize this with for definition of diversity. Diversity includes and is not limited to race, color, ethnicity, nationality, religion, socioeconomic status, veteran status, education, marital status, language, age, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, mental or physical ability, genetic information, and learning styles. Now, write down or talk to a friend. What does diversity mean to you? I'm going to give 30 seconds for that because we now have a working definition. And all of this can be found on the New York State Education Department website. If you Google NYSED and DEI, you'll find it. No more than 4-word summary. And I didn't put on a slide because I wanted you to talk about it or think about it for yourself. And I want you to go to the website because clarity is the first law of understanding. I see there's some chats. Diversity, everyone, from Catherine. Understand, from Brenda. Understanding, embrace others, respect. Excellent. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Okay. So from diversity, I'm going to move to equity. Remember, equity for me is personal. Equity, the guarantee of fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all while striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented full participation for all groups. Now, what groups? We just mentioned them in diversity, right? So let's do equity again, and then we'll do up to 4 words. Equity, it's 2 lanes here, right? The guarantee of fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all while striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of all groups. Jamie writes, everyone has a right to learn. So let's get up to 4-word summary on equity. We've done diversity, equity, right? Turn and talk, anti-exclusion, fair, non-judgmental, no stereotyping, benefit of the doubt. Thank you for that, Brenda. Somebody else, eliminate barriers to learning. Thank you for that. Oh, Sullivan County is on fire this morning. Excellent. Okay. Last one, inclusion. Authentically bringing traditionally excluded individuals and or groups into processes, activities, and decision/policy making in a way that shares power and ensures equal access to opportunities and resources. Ooh, I'm going to say that again. Inclusion. Authentically bringing traditionally excluded individuals and or groups into processes, activities, and decision policy making in a way that shares power and ensures equal access to opportunities and resources. Think about that, turn and talk, write down 15 seconds. What does inclusion mean? And then I'm going to go deeper. What does inclusion look like? And these are exercises you can do together in Sullivan County, in whatever county, in your school. What does that look like in our school? What is the evidence of such? And here's the good news. There's a lot of this going on already. And what we're talking about is how do we formalize it, crystallize it, and scale, pace and scale. So Brenda says, embrace others differently, enjoy people's uniqueness, Let them share their ways and stories. Thank you. Somebody wrote, every child matters. Thank you. That is Jamie. Okay, thank you. So we've got some clarity on definitions, right? And so if we can be clear on definition, we can be even clearer on our intention and what we do. And we can clearly define what we do and not allow others to create their own narrative, right? We just want to be this. Okay, can you hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Mills. Great. Love technology, but technology is your friend until it's not your friend. Okay, we're moving on. Thumbs up if this is making sense and this is worth your time. I get a thumbs up. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Okay, so let's now go. I'm going to change my slide and we're going to go a little bit deeper, right? Because now we're talking about urgency. And I'm not sure we would have been as urgent as we are as a community, as a culture, as a state, as a nation, if not for COVID-19. So the convergence of longstanding social, cultural, economic inequalities with the COVID-19 pandemic and its well-documented disproportionate impact on various communities brings urgency to our work, to your classrooms. I think the most underrated story in COVID is really how teachers and educators from the smallest preschoolers through higher education institutions have handled this on the fly with no playbook. But in their heroic efforts, they started saying, wait, what about this? It further exposed deep-rooted disparities and the enduring legacy of barriers to equality faced by so many of our students. It's laid bare the moral economic imperative to remove inequities that stand in the way of success for whole segments of New York student population. Now, if all means all, and I can't wait till I get into my next slide, because some people might think, well, they're talking about minorities. All means all, including African Americans, including Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, including, because we defined it already. We already defined diversity, right? Including learning styles, including socioeconomic status. But this is a time, it's a moral moment. What do we do going forward? Can we build it better, right? Normal is out the window. So now what do we do? Okay, stay with me. My computer, stay with me. Okay. So here's where we are. Create and sustain nurturing and engaging environment for all students. Now, the thing with all is a little bit tricky. All has not always meant all, okay? Just hasn't. And when the rhetoric doesn't reflect the reality, we invite friction and conflict, historically. All men are created equal. And then some people learned how to read and said, well, we are men. Because the rhetoric didn't match reality. Liberty and justice for all. Okay. When did women get the right to vote? Right? That's significant. That's significant. We invited that because the rhetoric didn't match reality. So what are we talking about? We're talking about all students welcomed and supported. What does that look like in your school, in your community, in your village? They're given opportunities to succeed. And the last one, cultures, language, and experiences. See, we can use youngsters' cultures, language, and experiences to our benefit every single day in teaching and learning. So I want to use Dr. King quote to make this next point. It's not that popular, but he said, the most dangerous thing in the world, and I'm paraphrasing, is sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. So let me give you an example. I'll confess here of my sincere ignorance. I told you I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised. And at a certain point, I was into boxing. I started boxing in college. I wanted to be heavyweight champ of the world, make a lot of money, and not have to work for a living. Well, it didn't work out. Here I am. But there was a time when I thought, when we go to training camp in Sullivan County, Kutchers to be exact, that we were upstate. Oh, we're going upstate to the country to train in Sullivan County at Kutchers. And there were different rounds. There was the Pines, the Concord, but Kutchers was our spot. And that was sincere ignorance. Like now I know, well, years later I found that, like that isn't even close to upstate, right? Still sincere ignorance. Then, but I was just passing through. Then I met a young lady who was in Albany. Okay, she was in college in Albany. I said, whoa, Albany's upstate. Ooh, it's so cold and it snows. Okay, sincere ignorance. Then I moved to central New York and I had never knew anything about lake effect snow. But I was much older and wiser. And then I said, oh, wow, there is a stark difference in what I thought everyone got in education in some communities than what happens in other communities. It's just very different. Okay. I'm going to make a point here. My daughter was in school in 3rd or 4th grade in Long Island. And she had a coding class in elementary school. This is how you code. It's fun. It's good. And then I was looking at high schools in central New York, and not many even offered one. That is an equity issue. That is an access issue. So often people will think, well, you know, this is my worldview on equity. Equity involves all. Like the notion that we believe that it's for them hurts us because if we're not looking at the entire picture, the entire population, everybody wins if New York State equips all students to be their best, right? Thumbs up if that makes sense. Thumbs up. I know many of your cameras are off, but you could even put it in the chat room. I just want to make sure I'm making sense as best as I can in this virtual setting. So what does all this mean in a virtual setting? I'm going to speed up now. What does it all mean in the K-12 world that I live in? Well, look, picture number one, there is this barrier. I think it would be safe to say it's important that fans are not on the baseball field, right? Everyone will agree. Thumbs up if you agree with that. But in the second image, we look at the different supports that we can do for the person who is smaller. Everyone can still see the game. In the third image, all three can see the game because the inequity was addressed. The barrier, the systemic barrier was removed. Thumbs up if that makes sense, if this picture makes sense. So what we want to do is look at the structures, talk to the people, find out, what does the data show us? What do the kids tell us? What do parents tell us? What do teachers tell us? That is a pathway. And do what you're doing already. Somebody says thumbs up, thank you. Do what we're doing and build on it. Now, how do we know if something is important in one's life? Well, you look at their checkbook and you look at their calendar. How they spend their resources, how they spend their time. That's how you know what's important. Thumbs up if you agree with that, right? If you look at my calendar, you will see what's important to me today. I have to do this. This is the main event. And there's some other things that are less important. But if you look at a pattern, you say, oh, he's into serving education. Okay. All right. So we've defined it. We've looked at it. I want to spend some time, right? This is a document that Dr. DeFore has. He can share it with you if you like it, but it really unpacks the Board of Regents initiative on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm not going to read it all, but if we were in person, we would go around the room and say, what does that look like in your school, in your community? Welcome and supported. We would say, okay, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, what does that look like in your community? And they would hear it, but someone else, maybe they would say, this is what happens in Monticello. This is how we know students are welcome and supported. Someone in Liberty might say, oh, that's an idea. We want to kind of tweak that a little bit because we do this, and right? That's sharing, that's community. That's an example. What are the opportunities to succeed for all? When all means all, and we defined all already, right? What are the opportunities? And I'm winding down, but equity means fair treatment and opportunity for all. Access to programs, classes, and needed support. So maybe we look at our AP classes and say, well, this doesn't seem like we're maximizing the opportunity. What do students need to be successful in there if that's what they want to do? Or how can we encourage them? And what supports might they need? Cultures, languages, and experiences. I think as an educator, the teaching and learning is so important, and it's typically built on relationships and knowing our students, which many people just do so well. And using culture, which is the way people do things, to your advantage, to our advantage. And we would say, if we were together, how do you learn the cultures of the different communities within your community? The different people, the different backgrounds. How do you learn it? And how do you maximize it to help students get where they want to go? That makes sense? If it makes sense, thumbs up. So now we're gonna close, and we're going to look at, this is my office, the Office of Access, Equity, and Community Engagement. And we're going to look at equity in action, right? What does it look like? New York State has a My Brother's Keeper initiative. This is our annual symposium. It happened in April, right? And so through data, so that's the research part, we looked at the young men of color. There's a gap. Right? There's Chancellor Young and all of with different presenters. We looked at what there's a huge gap. So there's data. Then Board of Regents put a work group together and a blue ribbon panel. So the board had a work group. Blue ribbon panel went across the state. What is needed? How can we change the tide here, right? So we looked at data, do some research, come up with recommendations, put out guidance documents, say these are things that are working, and then fund it. Remember I said, if it's on a calendar, it's on a checkbook, it's important. That's how you can tell. And so this is our symposium. And I share that because we did a variety of things. During COVID, we said, okay, we've got to bring the village together because they need support. Our teacher opportunity grant, and all this on it, if you Google NYSED and MBK, it's important. But what I'm sharing is a framework to say, like, this is one way, a process to engage with diversity, equity, inclusion. Look at the data, do your homework, do your outreach, work as a community, get input, come up with a plan and execute. Is it clean? No. Messy? Yes. Hard work? Yes. But if all means all, the youngsters deserve it. And I know that you have it in your heart to do it. Last thing we did is say, okay, communities are really struggling with COVID. We had one of our physicians who works close with us do a series, How to Thrive in Schools with the Reality of COVID-19. So I'm winding down with this. There was a former congressman, Clayton Powell, who had a speech, What's in Your Hands? And believe me, I'm not going to try and replicate it, but I am going to say this. We have the opportunity in our hands right now to give all young people the resources, the supports to live the kinds of lives that they hope and aspire to be. It makes our county stronger. It makes our state stronger. It makes our nation stronger when we can educate all. We are sending our young people into a world well equipped with both hands to serve, to build, and to grow, and to take care of us in our deep old age. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity. This is the end of my speech this morning. I'm honored to be here. And thank you, Dr. DeFore, and the entire team, including Ms. Hewlett, who worked with me behind the scenes. Have a great day, a great continued professional development. And I hope to see you in person sooner rather than later. Back to you, Dr. DeFore.
Dr. Alston, would you be willing to take some questions in the chat?
I will do my best.
Tell everybody I'm going to open the chat up.
Okay, so we're going to open the chat up, folks. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Alston, please feel free to enter it into the chat.
Particularly on this presentation, so that we're on, right? Okay. Okay, thank you for a great presentation. Appreciate that, Ms. Wilkerson.
You see anything, Anael?
I do not.
All right. Folks, if you have any questions after...
oh, there's one.
Go ahead.
Have you dealt with poverty issues among students? Okay, now they're coming in fast. All right, so I know what to do. Let me take a picture. Hang tight, good people. One of the tricks I've learned from Zoom along the way. All right, have you dealt with poverty issues among students? Yes, and I would say what I've learned in dealing with, well, let me back up. I started my career in New York City in a Title I school. And then I was teaching in Suffolk County in another Title I school. So the thing that I've learned with poverty, and it kind of goes back to beliefs, and it is shaped by my lived experience because I grew up part of my childhood in poverty, right? And I mean, these days I have a degree, 2 degrees from Columbia. So poverty it makes the educative process more challenging, but I've always taken the approach that being poor doesn't mean that you're sentenced to a failure and mediocrity. And so the question then becomes, and I think it's Ronald Edmonds says, how many effective schools do we need to see? And he was talking about students of color and students in poverty many years ago, before we can be convinced that if you see more than one, how many do you need to see? And so the issue of poverty means it's more difficult. But here's what we know. We know that when we put resources and supports and relationship, it makes a significant difference. Of course it's harder. Of course, it's not going to be the same journey for someone who grows up in a loving, committed home with 2 incomes and a safe community. Yeah. So I'm going to say that, yes, it's harder, but there's a whole lot of other things that are hard also. So I hope that answered your question. It's a lot more to it, but I would say the relationships are, I would say, even more significant. So, yeah, I'm going to stop there. Someone else says, I was born and raised in Bedford-Stuyvesant, 1963. Okay. My grandparents were immigrants, came from Barbados. Okay, that's not a question. Thank you for sharing that. But it said the mindset shaped my mind. So there's not a lot of questions, Dr. DeFore.
All right, Anael, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate you taking the time today and sharing with us. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, or comments after the presentation has been concluded, you can share them with Maria Summer or myself, and we'll certainly get those thoughts to Dr. Alston. Again, Anael, always good to see you. And we certainly appreciate you being here, and the rest of you on the call. Thank you for joining us for this most important presentation. Enjoy the rest of your conference day, and everyone have a very nice holiday weekend. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful fall weekend. Get outside and get some fresh air. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you. Dr. Alston, thank you from everyone.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.